Chapter 8 The House of Sickness. Heavenly truth that in life we have spoken, beautiful seed that on earth we have sown, these shall pass onward when we are forgotten, fruit of the harvest, and what love has done. Doctor, come and see the little girl from the Borneo mountains. Kandima was sitting cross-legged on the high white bed. A pleasant-faced nurse was standing over her. It was the nurse who had spoken. A tall, sandy-haired doctor stepped to the nurse's side. So this is the child. He twisted his mustache. Looks a little thin. Nurse, give her lots of milk and anything else you can to fatten her up a little. The eye looks terrible, doesn't it? The nurse tipped the child's head back so the doctor could see. It does. But we will fix that. The good man reached in his pocket and took out a gumdrop. He popped it into the open mouth of Kandima. She had listened to the conversation and had heard every word, but the gumdrop spoke a language she could understand better. The doctor and the nurse spoke in English. Ah, what a smile this little one has, the doctor exclaimed as he turned on his heel and continued with his round of patients. This was Kandima's first morning in the house of sickness. Her bed was one of many. The bed stood in two long rows down the length of the long room, and there was a sick child in every bed. Few of them could sit up like Kandima. Some had white cloth wrapped around their legs or arms. In the bed next to Kandima was an Indian child. She was so thin that even her bones seemed to have shrunk, and Kandima never looked at her without thinking of a spider. On the other side, the white wall, for Kandima's bed was the last in the row. The nurse looked kindly at the new patient. You will be here for several weeks, child, she said. We're going to try to help you all we can, and you must help us and do what the doctor says so that you may get well soon. The nurse spoke in Malay. Kandima understood. She nodded her head and smiled again. When Kandima's noon meal was brought, she stared in surprise at the tray. The jolly Chinese boy who fetched it smiled and jabbered talk Kandima could not understand. He pointed to a large round thing on the tray. She picked up the object and looked at it. It was a beautiful red color and smooth as a baby's cheek. It had a deep dimple in the front which a small stem stuck out. This must be fruit. Kandima turned the ball around in her small hands. A sharp knife lay on the plate that held the fruit. Should I cut it, I wonder? She replaced the beautiful thing with care. I will ask nurse about it. Such a pretty thing, maybe, to look at instead of for eating. There were other strange things on the tray. There was a tall glass full of white water. That must be what Teacher Dawad bought for his puppy. It looks the same. She drank a little. It tasted slightly sweet. In a little white pan was something golden brown. Kadima stuck her finger in and tasted the soft stuff. It was sweet, too, and something like the cream of the durian fruit, but not so good. On a large plate were more familiar foods, potatoes, vegetables, and a breast of chicken. On another plate were some strange biscuits, square and porous looking. Beside them was a square of yellow. Beginning on the familiar foods, Kandima began to eat. Before she had finished, a young nurse stopped beside her bed. How is our little girl getting on? She inquired with a smile. The doctor wants you to eat everything on your tray. He wants to see you getting plump and healthy. Kadima held up the large red fruit. What is it? Of course, you never saw one before. That is called an apple. It is very good for you. Doctors said that you must have one every day. Will I have another one tomorrow? Kadima questioned, almost speechless with delight. Yes, every day. Now be sure to drink your milk. She pointed to the glass of what looked like white water. After the nurse had gone, Kadima cut the red fruit in two. There were small brown seeds in the middle. I wonder if they would grow in our village. She picked them all out and tied them in the corner of her handkerchief. She removed almost all the center of the apple this way. Then she sliced off a very thin slice and ate it. The apple was good. It was not so good as durian, but better than almost anything else she had ever tasted. She ate it all. It was very good. That afternoon, a nurse came to Kandima's bed with a small white pan and a bottle with some fluffy stuff in a blue paper. "We're going to wash your eye with some medicine," she explained. Kadima braced herself. It would hurt, she knew, but she had not come to the big city for this. But had she not come to the big city for this? Had she not traversed the long trail down the mountain village? Had she not sailed in the great ship over the valley of water just for this medicine? She bore the treatment without flinching and without a whimper. Nurse was surprised. "So you can smile after that?" She patted the smooth, dark hair tenderly. "You are a brave little girl." It was the good left eye that had received the treatment. For weeks, Kadima's left eye was treated with medicine. The good doctor found that she had worms and malaria. She ate medicine for these afflictions. No matter what medicine was offered, no matter what treatment prescribed, she accepted it as a benefit and a gift with such gratefulness that the doctor and nurses often turned from her bed with misty eyes. Every day people came to see the little girl who had journeyed so far. Uncle and his family came often. They brought pictures and flowers and news from the Tuan's great big house across the valley of water. One day, young intern came. He brought a big parcel. "Open it, Kandima," he insisted. He took the parcel in both hands, turning it over, and she took the parcel in both hands, turning it over and looking at it from all sides. Slowly she took off all the strings, loosening each one and winding the string into a ball. Then she removed the paper with care, folding it with graceful fingers. At last she lifted the cover. Oh, really, truly dishes, just like at the Tuan's house. She clapped her hands for joy. She took out a tiny cup and held it in her little brown hand. She rubbed the smooth surface against her cheek. "Do you like it, little girl?" The child took one of his hands in both of hers and looked up at him with one lighted eye. After that, whenever the young intern came to the children's ward, he brought out something for Kadima. So did many of the nurses and attendants. "I declare I'll have to use a whole locker for the child's trinkets," said the nurse as she drew a couple of new packages from under Kadima's bed. One of the parcels had contained a beautiful doll, latest gift of the young intern. The box was empty. The doll was in Kadima's arms, learning the soft language of the mountains, which no one else in the child's ward could talk. Kadima bent over her new baby. The doll's eyes were brown, and her hair was black. Her cheeks were smooth and rosy. "She looks like Nancy," thought the little girl. "She looks like I would like to look." She heaved a heavy sigh. After a thoughtful silence, she spoke aloud. "I will call her name Ellen, so I will always remember her." Finally, there came a day when Kadima was wheeled away to surgery. She clutched the sides of the table. "They're going to take out my bad eye," she said to herself. "It will hurt, but this is what I came for. How much better my face will look when that terrible eye gone, with that terrible eye gone." She saw a white object above her face and smelled a particular odor. Then all things faded from her sight. Later, when Kadima woke in her own bed, she could see nothing at all. Had the white doctor taken away both her eyes? She tried to lift her hands. "Lie still, little girl," was the voice of her favorite nurse. "You are all right now. There is a bandage over both your eyes, and you will not be able to see for a few days. But you will have a nice time. Here is your dolly. You may talk to her." Kadima lay for a long time with little Ellen in her arms. Slowly the great drowsiness passed away. The little girl of long ago had come to life again in her arms, the same little girl whose pretty face the cruel stone had ruined. Now she was all well and beautiful. She would live with Kadima always and never be sad or lonely any more. "When we go home," she whispered, "you will have to ride up the mountain in the Boigan. But you won't mind that. I will walk right beside you, and you will hear my voice talking all the time." She shifted the doll to the other arm. "You will see mother and father and Chaya and Mukit and baby Bani, and all the village people. And you will see my other baby who is waiting for us there. I will wash your clothes myself and keep you clean, just like the nurses in this hospital. And you will sleep with me every night." Those who passed by the bed of the little girl with a bandage over both her eyes remarked that they never heard her cry. They had never heard her complain. And the sweetest smile in the hospital was worn by the little girl from the Borneo mountains. On the day when the bandage was removed, half the ward staff were standing about. It was evening, and the sandy-haired surgeon declared that he had been forced to elbow his way clear in from the street to see his now famous patient. The horrible ruined eye was gone. The other eye looked straight into the kind surgeon's face. "Now, Candima," he turned her face away from the light, "your eye is as bright and twinkling as a star. The infection is all gone. In a few days we will fit you with a new glass eye that will look so like your own you can hardly tell the difference." When the doctor had gone, Kadima reached up an inquiring hand. Sure enough, the bad eye was gone. The lid drooped over an empty socket. With a sigh of content, she snuggled Ellen in her arms and slept. In the morning, she tried to remember what the doctor had said, but she understood only a few words in the language of these white people. She did not understand that she was to have a new eye. It was enough that the old ruined eye was gone. A closed eye was not entirely satisfactory, but it was at least nothing frightful to look at. A deep thankfulness filled her heart. Everyone in the hospital was good. How kind they had been. She could only smile her thanks and grateful affection on them all. Candima's traveling case was under her bed. She had worn some of the low dresses on the great ship, but Auntie, the new Auntie, had laundered them all. She packed them again in the traveling case so all would be ready when Candima would be permitted to leave the hospital. "How about these pretty pajamas?" Nurse then held them up. "Would you like to wear them to call on the doctor?" Candima sat up instantly. She took off the hospital gown and put on the rosebud pajamas. Nurse took her hand and led her down the long ward to the far end, then down some steps to a great door. Inside the door was a pleasant room, and beyond it was a smaller room where the sandy-haired doctor waited. Just sit here. He lifted Kadima to a tall stool. He turned her face upward toward his and studied it for a long time. Then he took a long, shallow box and set it on the table. It contained a number of glass balls. As he looked at them, he hummed a funny little tune. He took one ball and held it close to Kandima's good eye, then put it back. He did this several times. Look, nurse, he finally said, this is perfect. He dipped the glass ball in some fluid, lifted the lid where the bad eye had been, and popped the glass ball in. There now, little one. He stood off smiling and rubbed his hands together with great satisfaction. What a pretty child you are. Nurse stepped into the next room and returned holding a mirror. Kadima looked in the glass. Was it really herself? A pretty little girl with two clear brown eyes looked back at her. She clapped her hands. Is it me? They can't be. Nurse and doctor laughed and peered, in every way delighted. There were many things Kadima wanted to say, but the words died on her lips. She couldn't make the doctor understand. She took his hand in both of hers and laid it against her cheek. What kind people, she said to herself. Even in this house of sickness, the kindness of people makes it beautiful.